As a young teenager in grade 9, I remember sitting in my biology class watching a film titled, quote, "The Miracle of Life." In this film, we meet Sammy the sperm, who along with his friends are on a mission to find Olga egg. Sammy is successful, Olga egg receives Sammy, and together they grow from a zygote to an embryo to a fetus before, in what I can only describe as scarring for a grade 9 boy, me and my classmates watched the culmination of this sequence in what was the live birth of a baby on video. Scarring. Many years later, as I spent time in reflection for writing this homily, I think of the babies that have been born in my family. I am fortunate to have 2 nieces and 2 nephews. And from previous employments, I was close with young couples and families who welcomed little ones into the world, as well as having my own friends who have allowed me a front row seat in watching their little ones grow up, which really can only be described as the miracle of life. Being mindful of the audience and my use of the word miracle, I do not mean in a divine intervention sense, rather in the sense of something being truly extraordinary. We talk about having faith like a child and childlike wonder and the good old days when I was a kid and seeing the world through a child's eyes. And when we make these statements and do these reflections, what do we see? The world, it's more colorful. It's bigger than we could ever imagine. It's full of possibility and potential. An adventure is lurking behind every corner. Strangers have the possibility of becoming friends, and everything could be a game or an opportunity to learn or experience something new. I saw this most obvious a few weeks ago as I was in Hamilton visiting my family. I have a 3-year-old nephew who lives life in overdrive. He lives hard, or he plays hard, and he crashes hard. And for him, his game of the day was running around and around and around the kitchen island over and over again, as us adults watched with amazement as this young kid just kept going. And not only that, but how he was able to keep going with such infectious joy that you couldn't help but watch, smile, and laugh. And then I observed my older niece, who was sitting at the same table with us adults, so she's 12, 9 years older than my nephew. She was sitting with us and she was learning to crochet with my sister. She used to be the one that was running around the kitchen island, and I was the one chasing her. Life for her, though no less captivating, it's changing. She'll be a teenager next year, learning to navigate the middle school years, changing hormones, internet safety, essays about Shakespeare, developing self-awareness, and one day, learning to drive. And at one time or another, each of us here was that young child running around the kitchen island. At another time, each of us here was that early adolescent on the precipice of gigantic physical, emotional, and mental change. And now, here each of us is, the accumulation of years and decades of life experiences that have molded us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually into the unique individuals that each of us are. For me, last year, 2023, was the year I turned 30. At 30, I was supposed to have my stuff figured out, my life sorted. I was supposed to have a 2-car garage, a steady income source, a house, a family, and a job which I loved that had limitless job growth and earning potential. This was the cultural narrative that I bought into. I had some of these things, but my 30th year and the years leading up to it provided a whole heck of a lot more change than it did certainties. During this last decade, I had 4 career changes, some significant, some smaller. Spent 8 years in school. I graduated twice. I met Nicole, who became my girlfriend. We got engaged and then got married. We bought a house. We had our car stolen. We adopted cats. I became an uncle 4 times over. We attended dozens of weddings of friends and family. We celebrated the lives of beloved grandparents and older friends. I left the religious community of my childhood, had the opportunity to travel many places, and heck, lived through a global pandemic. And here I am, the accumulation of these events and happenstances, both positive and negative, Yet if one or two of these things didn't happen, I wouldn't be the same person you see here. Yet what's remarkable is that our natural human response to this cause and effect creation, this ongoing miracle of life, the extraordinary chain of biophysical and psychological events that we experience daily and molds us into who we are, in this moment, our human tendency is to focus on the mundane. There's bills to pay, groceries to buy, toilets to scrub, jobs to work, doctor's appointments to book, books to read, vehicles to maintain, children to raise, strangers on Facebook to bicker with. The everyday necessary tasks which would yield adverse results if we left out even one of these things, apart maybe from arguing with people on Facebook. Instead of running around the kitchen island ad nauseum, we run through life one day after another with our checklists and to-dos, exhausted, worn down, and generally uninspired. If I may be so bold and quote from the Bible this morning, not because it's authoritative in any way, but merely to highlight the same tension that has existed for thousands of years, in the book of Ecclesiastes, which was written sometime between 450 and 180 BCE, we read, quote, "What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go." The writer goes on to say, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. In modern parlance, it may look like this. Why make the bed if you're just going to get back into it? Why shovel snow if it's just going to snow again? But I want to propose a response to this existential despair that the writer of Ecclesiastes notes. But before shifting focus to that, I want to add two important caveats. The first is that sometimes people necessarily shift into survival mode. So if you think back to an introductory psychology course, a person cannot achieve that self-actualization in Maslow's hierarchy of needs if the physical needs go unmet. Philosopher Susan Wolf suggests, quote, "It's a luxury to have a meaningful life." In our hustling economy with the cost of living crisis, self-reflection may just be an activity of the middle and upper middle class. Of course, this is not a rule, but an important note that I wanted to include. The second caveat is that even though I am the one speaking of this today, it does not mean that I do this perfectly well or even at all. My vocational background from Christian ministry necessitates me saying this, as there was often this false sense of perfection ascribed to the speaker, that if she or he were, for example, railing against gossip, that individual forever and always never engaged in such a sinful activity. Such is not the case for me. I love the idea of self-reflection and deep engagement with others, which you will see is my response to the writer of Ecclesiastes. Yet I have much space to be better at this in my life outside of work and school. But I'm going to forge ahead this morning anyway. So how we respond to the mundane is by intentionally turning attention toward the extraordinary and locating the meaningfulness in the experiences that we have lived. I'll say that again. How we respond to the mundane is by intentionally turning attention toward the extraordinary and locating the meaningfulness in the experiences we have lived. William Breitbart, a psychiatrist who explores meaningfulness with patients living with advanced cancer diagnoses, says this, quote, "Meaningfulness refers to moments when one feels most alive, connected to existence. Things from the past that, whether tragic or joyful, awesome or dreadful, when you look back on them, you find to be very life-affirming and profound." With friends, we may ask, what was the extraordinary chain of events which brought us together? How and where do and did our lives intersect? With family, either chosen or of origin, we may ask, what are the values that shape and mold us? What are the moments in our collective memories that have defined our family? And with our communities, be it a spiritual community like this or something else, we can ask, what are the narratives which we tell about ourselves? What brought you and keeps bringing you into recurring participation in the communities of which you are a part. In my preamble to this homily, I use the word responsibility to describe the task that we each have in both sharing about ourselves and learning about others. Responsibility is an appropriate word as it suggests that duty that we each hold, a duty to that ongoing miracle which is the collective story of humanity throughout time, a duty to the chapter that we are each writing and contribute to in this ongoing, extraordinary chain of events. Canadian Ojibwe author Richard Wagamese, working toward a similar end, wrote this, quote, "All that we are is story. From the moment we are born to the time we continue on our spirit journey, to the time we are involved in the creation of the story of our time here. It is what we arrive with. It is all that we leave behind. We are not the things that we accumulate. We are not the things we deem important. We are story." And in the same way, a sermon doesn't become a sermon until it is spoken, I believe a story doesn't become a story until it is shared. This is our responsibility and our pathway to meaningfulness. Yet, we only fulfill this responsibility if we are brave enough to ask, patient enough to listen, and bold enough to share. Yet we must also believe in ourselves enough to say that my story is good, my story is important, my story is meaningful, and my story is worth sharing. And our responsibility to others may be in helping them believe this about themselves. To reshare the inspiration for this homily, which we heard last week at the end of the service, in my work at Grace Hospital as a spiritual care practitioner, I met an 85-year-old woman who summarized the totality of her 85 years in a simple, dismissive way when I met her by saying, "I'm just not that interesting." Although I was momentarily taken aback when she said this, my response was something like this: "I appreciate that is the way you feel, but I wonder if you would let me get to know you, if you would let me get to hear your story and then decide for myself." What followed were multiple conversations exploring the dimensions, dynamics, and circumstances that made this woman the one who was sitting before me. And I'll never forget the glow in her eyes when, after the fourth or fifth visit, I was able to say with full authenticity, "Thank you for sharing your life story with me." A TV personality from Ontario, her name's Tracy Aaron Smith, says this: "If I were to reinvent religion, I'd make it about storytelling." She goes on to say that two of the most important things to humans are community and meaning, and storytelling provides both. When you know someone's story, you can't hate them. In fact, you might just fall a little bit in love with them. End quote. Each and every one of us here is extraordinary and is a living miracle. If we have eyes to see and ears to hear, may we each begin to see the meaning that our lives are full of and have been full of from day one. The life-affirming and profound experiences which have shaped us into who we are each today. Although it may feel like sometimes life is much more than running around the kitchen counter. Even that simple memory of my nephew is filled with profound meaning, but only if we have the eyes to see and the desire to find it. As we reflect, something I hope that you take even a few minutes today to do. May it not be done in isolation. Rather, may we remember that we have a responsibility to share and to inquire of the life stories that we are each living, regardless of our age, whether we are 85, 30, 12, 50, 100, or somewhere in between. To conclude this morning and to bring it full circle, with the kids and the young ones, I read Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You'll Go. As for them, life is still so full of possibility and potential for meaning-making. But I thought for us it might be fun to rewrite that poem, to better respond to the various later stages of life that we who remain upstairs find ourselves. So I hope you'll enjoy. Oh, the places you've gone and the places you've been, the faces you've met and the things you have seen. You've seen the sun rise and set on your years. You've faced joy and faced sorrow, both triumphs and tears. You started out young with dreams oh so bold. Now your story's half written, with many tales to be told. You've climbed mountains so high and crossed rivers so wide. With each passing year, you've taken it in stride. Oh, the roads you've traveled, the journeys you've known, through valleys of laughter and canyons of groans. You've weathered the storms, faced challenges tough, yet here you are standing, resilient, seasoned, enough. You've danced in the moonlight and basked in the sun. You felt the warmth of your friendships, which are second to none. But life's not a straight path, no, it winds and it turns, and sometimes it's bumpy with lessons to learn. You've worn differing hats in your various roles. You've been parent, sibling, and friend with both heart and with soul. All the chapters you've written and the pages you've turned are full of wisdom you've gained and lessons you've learned. There were days of great triumph, of victories won, and moments of darkness where nothing was fun. Yet the end of one phase marked the start of the new, and onward you journeyed, and onward you grew. You've witnessed world change evolving each day, from a simpler time to the digital age. The years may have silvered your once golden hair, but the spirit within you continues to flare. So here's to the places you've been in your life, the experiences cherished, and the growing through strife. May the road still ahead bring both challenge and cheer, for the story's not over, for you are still here. So share far and wide all the things that you've done, all the losses you've lost and the fights you have won. With eyes may we see all the meaning throughout, with ears may we hear the stories others tout. So embrace every wrinkle, each line on your face. They are badges of honor, not lines to erase. Here's to the places you're going and the places you've been, to the things not yet learned and to the things not yet seen. We will now sing our closing hymn, which will be led by Kelly, called Circle of the Sun.